You all are used to this TV stuff, not me. I don't want to be on TV. Can I change seats?
We have cameras all over the room.
It says on there.
Can't get
It's
out.
on air. So,
Okay.
as I said, the mayor is running just a couple minutes late, but she asked that I go ahead for time's sake and kind of do the review of what happened yesterday. I know we have some who were not able to be here yesterday, but thankfully are here today. We're missing some that were here yesterday, so I'll just go through it pretty quickly. Thank you. So just as a background, and those who were here yesterday saw this slide, I promise I will not do the 25 slides I did yesterday again. But we adopted this ordinance creating this tax increment finance district in May 2006. And it included a project plan that set forth authorized project costs up to $54.725 million. And those costs were to be funded from tax increments created within the district. So the growth in the ad valorem tax, 50% of that went towards the increment, or went towards the project cost, and then 60% of the sales tax generated within the district went to fund project costs. And that's been ongoing since 2006. The first store constructed was in, I think it opened in October 2006, so sales tax collections began a couple months later. There's a little bit of a lag there. And those have funded a number of components. The original components included traffic and roadway improvements, a hotel conference center and cultural facility, and of course we were going to buy the conference center, and things changed with Rock Creek Overpass. And so this project plan has been amended once before to move some funds from the conference center category into a Rock Creek Overpass category, and it left some funding more than was originally contemplated for a cultural facility. And that'll be a big piece of this amendment. Legacy Park, of course, has been constructed, and there were other components of that we've talked about. A lifestyle center, which that component has not moved forward yet. And then economic development, which has moved forward with NEDC developing 60 acres of land and selling a lot so far to Emmy, a local company that was growing for their advanced manufacturing center. It's been implemented over time with the adoption of a number of contracts, development agreements, and things like that. And so we have a number of considerations we have to consider in amending the project plan because of all of those agreements. These are the amendments essentially that we talked about yesterday in terms of the funding. Traffic and roadway, we originally allocated $11.55 million to that, and we've spent almost all of that. But we have 4 very important projects left to do. And those are important projects for anybody that has to drive down Robinson or to Tecumseh. So it's improvements at Robinson on the west side of I-35 at Crossroads Boulevard and Interstate Drive. It's improvements at Tecumseh at Flood and 24th Avenue, as well as Tecumseh at Interstate Drive West and East. And so those are areas of town that have been growing and that are very congested, and we have 4 projects where the city or the local share would be around $5 million. So we've allocated money with these amendments to those projects. The Rock Creek Overpass component, of course, has been completed, so no money being allocated to that with this amendment. The cultural facility, as I said, originally we were going to buy the conference center, and there was really only about $1.5 million left for a cultural facility. But with the release from that obligation and transferring funds over to the Rock Creek Overpass, we had more funding than we thought we'd have for a cultural facility, $8.75 million. And that's just never moved forward. The community and council, I think, has struggled to identify a project for that component and what that would look like. And so with this amendment, it's really being defined more as a recreation facility. We have the opportunity to put our Norman Forward projects, the indoor aquatic facility and the multi-sport facility, into UNP adjacent to hotels, restaurants, shopping opportunities, to serve as a good location for tournaments and things of that nature. And so the city will be putting in $22.5 million with Norman Forward sales tax funds to build those facilities. But this component provides for a little over $2.7 million to enhance those facilities, make sure we can host state swim tournaments, things like that, as well as land acquisition and some funding for the school district. One of council's biggest concerns with looking at ending the TIF or the TIF increment early was the impact on the schools. And you all know this better than I do. I know you live it every day, but the state funding formula does not take into account the same way ad valorem tax collected in a TIF district. And so ending the TIF early has an impact on the schools, certainly. And we've tried to mitigate that. We think we would have collected the full increment by December of 2020. And so that's when the increment would have naturally ended. By ending it early, we think it's about a $750,000 a year impact to the schools. And so with this proposal, we're capturing the ad valorem increment for the 2019 assessments, so everything constructed through 2018, assessed in 2019, payable in early 2020, so that the impact to the schools is really the 6-month difference between when the increment would have ended naturally and when it's ending under this proposal. And that's $350,000. And so in this recreation facility component, we've got $350,000 set aside to offset the aquatics facility contribution that was contemplated from the school district. That complex will be an important facility for the school swimming teams as well as the Sooner Swim Club, and so there's going to be partnerships with all the different users of that facility, and so that was how council chose to try and address the impact to the school district. Legacy Park, of course, has been constructed through the original project plan allocation, and then with the amendment in 2008, that budget was actually almost $11 million, and we've spent a little over $8 million on the park and related items. The things we haven't done are public art and enhanced landscaping. That's about $2.5 million of project improvements, and we're cutting those from the budget for this proposal. One, the Norman Forward projects locating them in the district will provide 1% of those construction budgets to go towards public art, and so there will be significant public art components in UNP. But two, in looking at ending this early, those were obviously components that didn't have necessarily a direct impact on the envisioned TIF or tax revenues and things like that, and so that was an area that got cut. And you'll see through this whole, through all of the components, we've tried to cut a little from each category to lessen the impact overall. The Lifestyle Center has been cut from $8.25 million down to $5 million. We've raised some of the requirements in order to access those funds from what was in the original project plan. Obviously, the focus is on something new to Norman, not cannibalization. I always struggle to say that. And things that meet certain sales per square foot requirements. Also, some of those requirements have to do with design, recognizing that we can't force a store to come here if we don't have the demographics, but we can do something about how it looks and do something to continue with the original plan of creating a destination shopping center. And then economic development originally had $8.25 million. We spent a little over $4 million on that. And so this amendment reduces what's left to $1.4 million, and that was really only, we were only able to do that because UNP agreed to purchase the corporate center land back from NEDC in a way that gets them out of some debt, and it allows them to keep the advanced manufacturing land, which is what really is marketable in Norman. We don't really have office shortages, we have industrial land shortages, so that enables them to focus on something that they've had success with and something that there's an identified community need for. Initial project activity costs, those were in the original plan for engineering, legal fees, things like that. That's being eliminated with this amendment. And then we've got a little bit in there for miscellaneous costs. We've done an audit, and there may be other little things that come up. And so we have come up with amendments that lower the remaining allocation by about $8 million down to $16.9 million. So that's what the amendments essentially do. The summary of expenses thus far, I showed this to you all yesterday. So of course the total authorized costs were $54.725 million. We've spent close to $30 million so far, which leaves us about $24.8 million left to potentially spend as authorized under the current project plan. And as I said, we're cutting that down by about $8 million with these amendments. This is a summary of the increment collections to date. I showed this to you yesterday, but again, the sales tax increment is 60% of sales tax generated within the district after transfer adjustments and an annualized average growth rate reduction based on sales tax trends in the city. And then the Ad Valorem Tax Increment captures 50% of the growth in ad valorem from property within the district. So to date, the sales tax, with this first store opening in October 2006, we began collecting sales tax in December 2006. Through July receipts, we've collected over $35 million in sales tax. The ad valorem, because there's a delay based on when a building is constructed, when it's assessed, and then when the tax increment is paid. We received our first collections in spring 2008, so to date we've collected $11.6 million. That doesn't include the 2019 assessments. We don't know what those are going to be yet, but we think around $2 million. And again, that's just the 50% that goes back into the TIF. The other 50% is already going back to the taxing jurisdictions. So in 2006, the economic analysis that this committee looked at projected that over the entire 25-year term of the TIF, it would be funded by sales tax at about a 2/3 to 1/3 ratio. So 2/3 of it would be funded by sales tax and 1/3 of the funding would come from ad valorem. What's really worked out so far, and of course this is partially because of the delay in ad valorem, and we haven't gone the full 25 years, but so far it's been more of a 75 to 25 split. So 75% of the revenues are from sales tax and 25% of the revenues are from the ad valorem tax increment. I pulled out those projections from 2006 and wanted to give you this comparison. In 2006, through the first 11 years of property tax collections, we thought back then we'd have about $11.6 million. We have about $11.6 million, just about $50,000 off there, which is pretty surprising given the recession. I did that math probably 3 times, thinking surely I've missed something. Used an Excel spreadsheet, so it wouldn't be my error, but it's pretty close. The sales tax is a little bit under. And again, that follows a trend we've seen really throughout the city where the sales tax is pretty volatile month to month and hard to predict. So the role of the Statutory Review Committee is set out in the Local Development Act. And it's pretty similar to what gets done when the plan's initially adopted. But instead it's just focused on the changes, and so you have to consider what the committee needs to find or determine is whether the project plan as amended will have a financial impact on any taxing jurisdiction, whether the amendments affect the initial findings with respect to the eligibility of the district and your initial approval of the project plan and project. So the first one, I put the easy one first. Does it affect the eligibility? This was eligible because it was designated as an enterprise area by the Department of Commerce. That hasn't changed, and these amendments certainly don't change that. So eligibility is still in place regardless of these amendments. But the other 2 questions are the things that you all need to discuss and determine what kind of finding you want to make on those. Do the amendments affect the committee's initial approval of the project plan? I wasn't here in 2006 when the initial committee met, and I'm not sure how many of you were actually on the committee at that time. I know we've had a lot of change. But essentially what the committee did is look at the effect on taxing entities and the appropriateness of the approval of the plan and the project. And that's right in line with what's required in the Local Development Act. And then, will this have a financial impact on the taxing jurisdictions? Of course, the taxing jurisdictions, other than the school, will receive the full benefit of the ad valorem tax generated within the district once that increment ends. As I said earlier, there is an impact to the school through the state funding formula, and we've taken some steps to try and mitigate that as best we can. And really in conversations, I think, between my predecessor and Nick and Brenda, I think that the discussion was really, we wanted to give the school some time to plan for that. Whether it ended naturally or otherwise, they need to be able to budget for that because it does impact them in a different way. And so by continuing to receive that ad valorem increment from the 2018 or 2019 assessments, the way that gets paid, it buys another year before it would impact the budget. And then, of course, we put in the $350,000 to offset the aquatic center contribution to help also.
Which I haven't been in conversations about that, so I heard about it in passing, but the first part's absolutely correct.
Okay. And so that's just a good summary of where we are and what council is needing from you all. Once you issue your findings, they'll go to council, but first they'll go to planning commission for a vote and a review, and then we'll have 2 public hearings before council actually votes on those. So.
I'll add in terms of impact on the taxing jurisdictions, we have budgeted for the fiscal year 20 accounting for this to end. So the city very much has listened to the residents. We've all heard in the TIF, we've all received lots of angry emails. I would beg to say there has not been a more divisive issue than this one in Norman, Oklahoma. And I am thrilled with what they've put together to negotiate with everyone involved in the contract to make sure that we still achieve a lot of the main purposes. I love putting Norman Forward projects there. I think that's going to benefit all of the taxing jurisdictions and the residents and visitors to Norman, frankly. I'm very happy with the plan. I think it's a compromise in that everyone is not completely satisfied with it. There are things missing, but we need to move forward, period. We have got to move forward. We have other major issues facing our community. Council has seen this for a while. It took a little bit longer to get you all together. Summer is a difficult time for planning, but here we are. I think it was a great presentation, and I'm excited to hear your questions and thoughts about moving forward. Who wants to start?
Well, I'll jump in. So I'm generically in complete agreement with it's time to move on. I think we're really close. I like where we are. I like the compromises, all that. This may be a procedural question, all that being said. So I understand the 3 components that this body votes on. Mm-hmm. The question I have is the document that's the amended project plan has an amended date on it, and it still says draft. So who finalizes this, and where does this get approved?
Because this is part of a settlement between the city and the developers, we are working on that together. Council adopted the MOU back in March. I talked a little bit about that yesterday, and that was one of the requirements of the MOU is that we work together to try and end the TIF cooperatively, and the project plan is an important piece of that. Okay. And so, like I said yesterday, we're down to a couple of issues, and I think we'll know how we address those issues once we have the numbers for the ad valorem.
So this is an internal document that's just being negotiated.
Right.
This is not something this body votes on or comments on. Or
you're voting on whether the amendments affect your initial approval of the project plan and whether they have a financial impact on the taxing jurisdictions. I wanted to provide it to you because the substance of the project plan, of course, is what you're reviewing, what's being changed and amended through this process. But what the parties are still working on is that $17 million target, and we don't have all of the information yet on what that final property tax value is going to be. We should get that in the next week or so. But we're committed to making sure there's sufficient funding to do all those project costs. It's just how we address that shortfall, and right now it's just hard to know because we don't know that exact dollar amount. And so that's what we're kind of waiting on.
so if there are things in this document that I guess I would like to look at deeper, this is not the body to do that in. How do we get you that information or comment on that, or what's the appropriate way to ask those
If
questions.
something in the project plan that's being amended affects your, approval of the project plan, I think that's perfectly within.
But that's what
on
but
this
we don't
body.
approve the project plan. This body doesn't, right?
It's, you approved it initially.
Right,
And so
but the
it's whether or
amendment
not
to
those
the-
amendments affect that initial approval.
Okay.
And so if, whatever you all come up with, we'll take it to council. If they want to do something different, if you do something different from what they've proposed, then they'll have to have a supermajority to override what you recommend.
So I'm trying to understand your question. about
Well, I'll
if,
just ask. I just don't know that this is the body to do it in, so I don't want to bog down this
Um,
process in details. But yesterday I asked a question about the definition of the word unique. Cannibalization is what I'm stuck on. So I read, your slides are excellent. They summarize everything excellent, but they're not, word for word what's in the document. So I went to the document and read word for word what's in the document. And for instance, and I'm on page 12, so under Town Center costs, number 4B says costs needed to support retail entertainment user that is not already located in Norman. It's been a long time ago since I went to law school, and I don't do this every day like you do, but that language to me does not say unique. That says the entertainment user is not already located in Norman. So to me, this language puts us at a risk where Home Depot can be here, but Lowe's cannot. Or, Lowe's can't come in because Home Depot is already here. And don't read anything into my example. Can't have Taco Bell and Taco Bueno. That to me says that if one is here, the other one can still come in. So we can still get the Office Max, Office Depot thing going that we've seen before. Those things are not unique. So if I was reading the definition of unique, like we had in the slide, I'd be more comfortable saying
Yeah.
those things, are the same. But this says user not already in Norman. So the definition of user is that a brand name? Is that a type of store? Is that
I
I'm
think
having
it
definition
depends
issues.
on retail or entertainment. If it's a retail user, it wouldn't be an incentive. They wouldn't be eligible for an incentive if it was a user already in Norman. So this is just an out of the air example, but Bed Bath & Beyond, they would not be incentivized for moving into the TIF, regardless of their sales per square foot.
Is this
Look
just
down-
referring to businesses that'll be incentivized?
Right, right. The only business, this is referring to businesses that would be eligible for incentives, and they have to meet all of these qualifications. So entertainment user, I think, is where it's harder on D. But it says the user must present an entertainment option not already located in Norman. So,
I like that better.
right, so for retail, it's hard to say, we already have a department store in Norman, so we don't want a Macy's.
Yep.
You wouldn't want to say that. But for entertainment, it's a little bit easier to say, we want other entertainment users, but that provide different entertainment options.
But for cannibalization, I'm back on retail. For cannibalization, if we have a Dillard's, we may not want a Macy's. I mean, we saw that with Office Max, Office Depot. We saw that there were some other things that were on Ed Noble Parkway that ended up in North Park that I know created a lot of frustration in the cannibalist discussions. I just want to make sure our language is clear that we, as a body, don't get to meet about this again in 2 years when everybody's frustrated with the retail that's coming in.
Well,
I'm
and
hoping it's entertainment, frankly.
Well, I am too. That everybody knows
the
that's
other
why
thing
I'm in
to
this
point
group.
out is these are more stringent and more restrictive than what's in the project plan now. Right now, it can be 2 of 3 things. It has to be a store that's not already in Norman, or a store that's not located within 25 miles, I think, which gets you right up to Penn Square.
But it's a store whose title is not in Norman, right? Not a type of store.
Right.
I think the same problem on entertainment. Back in the original, we said we wanted a theater. Now you're making it so hard that I don't think the developer can fulfill that. I don't think he can fulfill that requirement because something is already here. You got a boutique theater, you got a first run theater, you got a dollar, well, you had a dollar theater, all of that's there, yet in the original plan, we want a theater. We're looking for a theater experience. And theaters, big theaters in these type of environments draw crowds and they shop and they eat, yet we're restricting. And if you go further in this, in your plan for the town center, I don't think you want them to develop a town center. You've made it so hard to bring anybody in that it won't occur.
I think I would disagree with that statement. We don't have a 3D movie theater. We don't have a Topgolf. I mean, we can go on and on about creative options, but
Yes,
we have a
but-
community that's not thrilled about giving business incentives, and I have no problem putting restrictions on it that get us to closer to where we want, that avoids cannibalization, and I think this is a good compromise.
And Mayor, I agree with you. I prefer to have entertainment also, but we have the language in in this draft amendment of the project plan that allows for retail or entertainment. And my concern is I just think we better make sure that language is very cautiously drafted to be sure that we do not have a cannibalization problem. And this reads broad to me. It doesn't read like what the slide was. It doesn't have the word unique in here at all.
It's definitely more restrictive, as Catherine said, than
It's
the
better
first
than it
one.
was, and I agree, but we have, one final opportunity at this juncture to make it very tight. And, I mean, why not use the word like unique or define
I
unique?
think-
I brought that up
Tell
yesterday.
you from the discussions with the developers that what we struggled with is the very two sides that you all have brought up, is we didn't want to be so restrictive that we end up closing the door on something that would be really good for Norman.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to be too broad where we've got the Home Depot Lowe's type situation. And so it was trying to balance those two interests. I think it's worth pointing out that the lifestyle center costs were only for retail stores before, so we weren't able to incentivize a movie theater before, and that's a big change here, recognizing that retail now tends to move with entertainment rather than entertainment coming because of retail. And so we've tried to adapt to that new retail environment in a way that we think will work for the foreseeable future. Again, they only have until 2026 to ask for these funds to come up with a proposal. So I'm just trying to foresee what that kind of development would look like over the next 6 or 7 years.
What else?
Under E, on the effective date, any penalties for failure to construct, a specific deadline will be waived. What are you talking, are you waiving previous penalties? You're waiving future penalties? It's very...
And I didn't talk about this yesterday only because this was not a provision that was in the previous project plan. This was an issue that came up through subsequent development agreements, and so that's really where we're going to be amending that requirement. But through the development of the TIF and through a number of development agreements, the city opted to move forward on some components before the Lifestyle Center. Legacy Park, originally it was going to be done after the Lifestyle Center. And we reversed that because we wanted to get the park done first, and this was at a time when retail wasn't doing great, and so it made some sense to reverse those priorities. And in doing so, we attached some significant penalties to failure to build a Lifestyle Center by a certain date. Mm-hmm. That date's been extended a couple of times. Council's recognized that the recession slowed that down. The big department stores that were originally envisioned are not building new locations, and so everyone kind of just hit the pause button to see what that retail environment would look like going forward. So that the current deadline to build the Lifestyle Center without being subjected to any penalties is June 30th, 2023. If they were to include a walkable design, a parcel development plan that ties into the hotel and to the Legacy Park across 24th, there's the potential that it would go to 2026. So that's what we have on the books now. Here we've incorporated all of those requirements for that 2026 deadline in order to receive any incentives. And we've lowered the amount of the incentives by $3.25 million. And so the exchange there was to get rid of the penalties, You know, use the carrot instead of the stick approach, I guess, and try and really work more on what kind of retail and entertainment development we want.
Okay, so all this is referring to the amended penalties that are now in effect,
In a
not as
development
far as
agreement.
the original.
Right, the original project plan did not contain penalties.
And if we have a project that comes up that we don't feel is unique, what is the process for approving said project? And if we don't get it built by 2026, what happens to that money?
If the developer were to bring forward a project, they would have to demonstrate that it meets all of these requirements, and it would be a decision made by the city manager as general manager of the TIF authority. Recognizing that things could change and there could be a really great project that doesn't really fit these criteria, but Norman may still want it, the option is still there for the developer to come to council and do a development agreement based on whatever it is they're proposing. And so that opportunity ends on June 30th, 2026. If we don't get a proposal by then, those funds under the Local Development Act and the project plan could go to other project costs set forth in this amendment. Or if we had already done those other projects or they were all sufficiently funded, it could go back to the taxing jurisdictions the way it came in, essentially. So it would be a refund under the Local Development Act to the city for the sales tax portion, to the county for the county tax portion, to the schools, to the Moore Norman, to the libraries.
So we went for the carrot versus the stick with a refund if they don't meet a project that matches everything that's listed, or come to council for a special project.
Right.
Okay. What else? This is super exciting stuff, right? I know.
I'm not sure I got the answer I understand to your initial question, and maybe I missed your question. So this is still a draft because we haven't finalized negotiations at this point?
They're final except for that issue of if the collections are short of what's needed to fund the project cost. And so that's the only thing that we're working with the developers to determine.
And in this, in the highlighted part, it's on here, it says that if it isn't sufficient, then you will continue to collect ad valorem dollars until it is sufficient.
That is what the developer has on the table. That's not the city has agreed to, and we're still working through that issue.
And so doesn't that very specifically affect number 3?
It would. It would affect number 3 if that's the way we went forward. It would affect the impact to the schools in a positive way, and the other taxing jurisdictions would not get the benefit of that 2020 assessment. And so that's why we've pushed back on that, and we're still kind of working through that. But again, without knowing what that shortfall is, if any, it's hard to figure out what the solution is.
But isn't it hard for us to make a decision on that if we don't know what that is?
If it's your recommendation, if you want to be that specific, that the amendments, you approve of the amendments subject to that increment ending on that date with the 2019 assessments, then that's what we'll go forward with, and we'll find another way to fund the shortfall.
And how do we verify that the rest of it is finalized? I mean, they haven't signed off on it. Who do we?
They are not a signatory to it. They will not sign off on it. But I can tell you from my negotiations with the developers that is the only remaining issue.
She's on to it. Do we have an estimate of what a shortfall could be, how close we are?
It really depends on the property tax.
$1 million, 100,000?
I hesitate to give a number. I mean,
What you got, Anthony?
It depends. There's a lot of unknowns. How much comes in from property tax, how much the projects cost, what projects come first.
At this point, do you all, Anthony, even have uncertified totals? I know at the library we have uncertified totals and they
We
expect
have
to certify them
estimates,
tomorrow.
but not of them. We only have estimates, in which it says about $2 million. That's based on those estimates.
Do you have a plus minus on that by any chance? I mean, I know that we're so ready to be done with this that, you know, let's talk. Let's move forward. How much could it be, more or less?
It would, I would say 10%, give or take.
Okay.
is a realistic figure. And again, as Catherine says, remember that under the development agreements and this updated project plan, if there was a shortfall, then the city would come up with money from some other source. Okay, but the city would obviously try to avoid that. Cut some cost in one of the projects, whichever one happened to be the last project to be funded. Come up with money from some other source, the city's capital fund or the parkland development fund or something.
So if there's a shortfall, it's on the city to make it up. It won't come back on the county. The county's in for what it is.
Not what I read.
That's not our language.
Yeah,
That's
if the
the part that we're
committee,
negotiating.
That's what's in the document.
yeah, I want to make sure that
His county is responsible.
That's why I highlighted it,
It says
because
the
that's not what
taxing
we've agreed to
jurisdictions.
yet.
Okay.
No,
So the highlighted stuff is pending?
pending.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the.
yeah, see, I would think that the
Negotiation.
committee, this committee would be well within its purview to say, you approve of the changes if you take out that parenthetical statement on page 14 that says, or such longer period as may be required. You know, that's,
So we have the ability to do that. But if we made that change and it went back to council, they would have to have 6 votes to
Only if
override it.
council wanted to do something different than what the committee recommended.
If they wanted to switch it back, we'd have to have 6 votes.
Right.
But what I heard you say earlier is this committee is not responsible for changing language in this document. This is a negotiated contract between the city and developers.
That's true, but under
So I
the
don't know
Local
where-
Development Act, if these amendments affect your approval of the plan, have a financial impact, I think that is within the committee's purview.
Like I assume Dr. Miliarino could say, no, we don't want your $350,000.
Sure. I don't think he's gonna.
Just throwing
say
it
that.
out there.
Yeah, I just don't know much about it, so I can't say yes or no, so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and just to further clarify for Mr. Stacy and whomever, I hesitated to ask this question because I don't know if it's the right forum. If I were having to demonstrate these criteria and I was, did you say the city manager's office approves it, part of that group, I think some of these terms are vague and that concerns me. Now, part of that comes from the fact that I got involved with this process when we were beating down the definition of cultural facility, trying to figure out, can we put the senior center in, all that, I mean, we won't rehash all that, but that delayed a lot of these projects for a long time because we did not have a definition for that language. And I remember sitting in this room and saying, gosh, if that had just been defined in the beginning, we wouldn't have this issue. So my only reason for bringing that up, my intention is not to stall a vote or anything like that. You guys are hashing this out with the developers. I don't want to sit in this room in 2 years and have somebody going, well, what's retail? What's a demonstrated user? What's unique? The word unique's not in here. Knowing that we were really close. I wish that language could be tightened up. I don't think that it's in my role on this committee to rewrite language, though.
And will
If I
say
understood your
this
answer to my first question
is-
about that.
I gave you that term sheet yesterday
Yeah.
that's attached to the council resolution.
Okay.
That is the language that has been approved by both parties.
Okay.
So that's not
Yeah,
changed in this
Okay.
document.
And I may be the only one concerned.
So will those terms have a financial impact on the taxing jurisdictions? And I think to that, you can say yes.
Well, the original plan, I told you they had different criteria back in 2006. The retail sales per square foot that had to be demonstrated were quite a bit less. It was $175 per square foot for stores larger than 10,000 square feet, or $275 per square foot for stores of 10,000 square feet or smaller. So we've tried here by increasing that to make sure we're getting a higher quality of store, or a store that's producing more revenue, more customers, things of that nature. The other two criteria I mentioned, you had to meet at least 2 of the 3 in the 2006 plan was the retail store shall be a retail store not currently existing within a 21-mile radius of the district. Map that out, that's right up to the Square Mall. And the retail store shall be relocated from outside the city limits of Norman. So it had to meet 2 of those 3 criteria, including the retail sales per square foot. In theory, it could have met the 2 location criteria, and not the retail sales per square foot criteria. But here, it would have to meet those higher criteria to be eligible to receive any funds.
Is there another copy of the highlighted one? Can I have that? Yeah, I don't have that. They gave me that yesterday. It's on my
Another
desk.
clarification I have, Catherine.
Thank you.
This amendment is stating that the
It's in my office.
collectively, the ad valorems will continue to pay through their 2019 collections, correct?
2019 assessments, so everything
Assessments.
constructed through the end of 2018.
Right. But the city has chose to end its sales tax collection June 30th.
Correct. Correct, and as I said, when it started, the city's first sales tax collections were in December of 2006, but because of that lag with the property tax didn't come in until the spring of 2008.
But you're ending it 6 months early.
We're ending the sales tax June 30, and we're ending the ad valorem based on the assessments through December 31st, 2018.
Are you estimating it at 100% collection or?
No,
Okay.
it's 50% for ad valorem and 60%
No,
for
he's
assessments.
asking what percentage are you estimating the collection coming in at?
Right.
For the
Like
property
we
tax.
estimated at 94 to 96%
Yeah.
for us,
Yeah.
97 for you, which
Yeah.
makes
I
a
see.
big difference.
I see.
Yeah.
We
That
don't
gives you
have
that
the estimates
grace.
of even what, from the county, I think, of
Well,
what the
they're-
assessments are.
I thought they were in.
They're being certified tomorrow.
Okay,
Okay,
so we'll
yeah.
get those tomorrow or this week probably, but that's when we'll know. Typically, it's
But do you
been
estimate it
within,
100% or do you estimate?
typically looking at our estimates compared to collections, it's a 1% difference. It's very
I
close.
don't know, actually, it's just based on whatever has been in the past.
Yeah.
Can I have that back?
So if
estimated at
average
100.
collection is 97%, that's what you estimated at? And so like a historical past, like an average of 3 years or just the last year or?
Since the TIF started.
Okay.
Catherine, procedurally, so I'm looking at the term sheet now, which has the exact same language as that, which is great. That's fine. It's good. We're consistent there. This is where I'm really hung up on this, but walk me through it because I may be missing something. Costs are needed to support a retail and entertainment user that is not already located in Norman. Okay, support a user not located in Norman. In the slides, it says unique to Norman. I have notes from prior meetings where we've had retail people in here saying unique to Norman. Again, maybe I'm overthinking this. I do not read that as unique to Norman. I read it something that's not physically here. It's not located here.
Unique to
Those are two
Norman.
different things to me.
Yeah. Unique to
Help me
Norman really
understand that.
related more to the entertainment user, and so
Right.
in D, it says it has to be, the user has to present an entertainment option not already located in Norman. So there, the focus is not on the user, it's the type of entertainment.
Okay, so.
Not already located in
So I'll
Norman.
I'll stop the sentence at the word or. Costs are needed to support a retail user, I guess, but it's still not located in Norman.
Yeah, and again, it's that department store example, you know, are you gonna,
So would we make a motion to amend the language?
What, I don't know what's involved in that. I'm not trying to do something that, delays anything, creates the need for a council meeting. I just am bringing that up as something that I see could be a red flag down the line or a sticking point down the line. It could create confusion. And if we have an opportunity to simply amend that here, why not do that?
a change in that language would require additional negotiations with the developer, because that's what was settled upon. So, can you change it in this process? Sure, you could approve the project plan or recommend approval of the project plan amendments subject to some changes. But even if council adopted that, I've still got to go back to the developer and negotiate that. And I don't know what they would say. We went back and forth on these quite a bit. And because, we're trying to balance the interest of not being so restrictive that we miss a chance at a really great project, or so broad that we end up supporting cannibalization even though we don't want to. And that's just what was settled on.
But the word being used in these meetings is unique, and that's not
Well,
what's in here.
To me, the proposed user must present an entertainment option not already located in Norman, and that's my fault, but to me that means
Okay.
unique.
Okay.
And then with B, I've got this copy now on page 9. The highlighted part says it is not intended that the project costs set forth in this 2019 project plan will be funded through tax apportionment bonds, notes, or any other financing. However, should the sales tax and ad valorem tax increment apportioned as provided in section 9 be insufficient to fully fund the project costs authorized therein, the city will provide additional funds as needed to fund said project costs.
That's the city proposed language.
So if it is not where it needs to be, we pick up the tab,
Yeah.
as in the city.
That's what you're proposing, but that's not what's in our document.
That's on page 9 of your document.
Or but not the highlighted part
It's
of
right there.
the back.
So the city's picking up the difference,
That's what the current language proposed by the city is, yes.
not the ad valorem partners.
That's, the document I
That's
got
on
yesterday,
mine.
I pull up, is what's proposed by your partners that you're negotiating with, and it says that we will pick it up.
And I don't know why yours says that, because this is what was handed out yesterday.
Well, on page 9, it says that. On page 14, it says the opposite.
Okay, so it's the two different competing
Contradictions of
approaches.
Okay, thank you.
One page says this, one page. The problem I have is what we're going through right now. We have a draft, yet you're wanting us to make a recommendation on a draft, and there's too much being changed here. I don't feel comfortable approving something that's in a draft form that isn't in the finished form, because that's our responsibility. There's too much in the air here that can change from this draft to what actually goes. And so I think you're asking us to prematurely approve something that we probably agree in theory on, but it's not the document that's finally going to end up. And so I'm a little hesitant to do anything until this is not a draft and this is the document that we're going to bring forward.
Thank you for sharing that, but my understanding is it won't be the document we're going to bring forward until it goes through this process. Is that correct?
Right, I mean,
Like, this is the step to get there.
Right, but then we've got to come back and approve it again? In
no.
other words, you're asking us for approval based on this document, and this document isn't complete.
Because we need you to approve it.
I
But
think we
you're
have to approve the final, not the draft.
What you're approving is whether the amendments affect the initial approval of the project plan and whether it would have a financial impact on the taxing jurisdictions. You can be specific in your recommendation to say you want the ad valorem increment to end with the 2019 assessments. And that language on page 9 is what will be in the document.
Well, based on this draft, yes, it's going to impact the people the way it's drafted, and even if we made amendments to this, it's going to affect them.
Either
Until
way,
we see
it's
the
an
final
impact. Yeah.
final deal, I feel it's going to impact the entities involved here.
Even in the final deal is going to impact the entities.
Right, they'll be getting all the tax increment.
Question is which entities and in what way. They're going to be affected
Either way.
either way.
Well, and Catherine, what I heard you say is if we vote on a specific, to say this is the language that it'll be, that's an option, but then you also said the developers haven't agreed to this yet, so we don't
Yeah.
have that authority.
The
The developers
issue
haven't agreed.
is how the city provides assurance it will provide those additional funds. Not that the city provide them, it's just how we provide assurance that we'll provide those additional funds. And so we're working on that right now. And again, we don't know what the shortfall is, if any, yet, so that's the hard part for us to try and figure out what's the best way to assure the developer the funds will be available.
Well, I think you've accomplished your goal, even if we don't vote on it, because you know our concerns that you need to negotiate. then you can bring back the completed document and we can recommend to council whether they accept it or not accept it.
Let's walk through the process one more time of how this works.
Okay.
So the TIF is in place
Yes.
and the council would like to make significant project plan amendments. To do so, by statute, we have to take it to this committee and the committee can recommend it or turn it down.
Right, or recommend it with changes. On any of these items, of course, the eligibility is not affected, but the other two are where you could do that.
And so regardless of does it have to pass before it gets to the process where we can actually finalize these changes?
Does it have to pass this committee?
Because we've looked at it, but the problem is we can't finalize the document until we go through the full process. Am I understanding that correctly?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily, no. I mean, I think,
Because I see where everyone's getting stuck.
Yeah.
Like, why would we vote for something that's not a final document if we can wait for a final document?
That's not what the question, that's not what the question asks.
I thought we were just being asked
The question
this.
asks is, does the amendment affect the committee's initial approval of the project plan, to which the answer is yes. The third question is, will this have a financial impact on the taxing jurisdictions? It doesn't ask what kind of impact, it just says, will it? And the answer is yes.
So the way that
so-
that's presented, we just have 3 yes and no questions that you're asking us to do, and we have nothing to do with these project amendments.
I mean, I think
It's
the
the way
amendments
that
are
this was
important because
presented.
they inform your answer to those questions.
Yeah.
So that's what we're all struggling
They
with. I
inform the
think,
answer,
is-
and we have the option to make recommendations of, since they will have impacts, here's what we think needs to happen. Or since it will affect the taxing entities, here's what our concerns are. But if you're just answering the question, I mean, what you're doing is asking us to answer those questions. That's what I'm hearing.
Which we've done.
And I'm hearing that we are authorized to make recommendations, but we won't get a chance to know whether any of that was changed or what the final document said before we have to decide on number
Even
3.
council could not take your recommendations.
Right, so we
Right,
still
but-
don't have a final draft of anything,
What
so we
gets-
really don't know what the financial impact
What
is.
gets done here is what will go to the planning commission and to the public hearings. And
So if
to
they-
council.
if
And
they
then
do
council
nothing.
changes what you do here, that's where they have to have a supermajority to override.
But the
what you
question
do.
is, what do we do here? We've answered the
I
questions.
thought it was that.
So what now?
I mean, to the extent there's any changes to the project plan, that's something. I went back and read what happened in 2008 with that amendment. It was very simply set forth in the minutes. 2006, of course, we had a citizen committee in addition to the statutory TIF committee. So there was a lot of input in that original plan. 2008, when it was amended, it was more, and of course, they were not changing the project cost amount at that time. And it was arguably a minor amendment, not a major amendment. But at that time, it was more of a, yes, no, these amendments don't affect the committee's initial approval of the project plan. Yes, it will have a financial impact. It was shockingly short. But here, we are cutting funds from the project plan. And so the financial impact discussion is a little different. If you all feel that Ad Valorem Tax Increment should absolutely end with the 2019 assessments, then you can make that part of your recommendation. That's this language on page 9, which is the city will provide additional funds as needed to fund said project costs, will carry over into 14. The only changes that would be to that is to establish exactly with what funds we would provide those additional funds needed. But the substance of that is what would carry on through the document.
Would you
And
be
that's
able
what
to-
would go forward to council and
Would you be
planning
able to
commission.
walk us through how in this negotiation that the draft came out, that we wound up with the discrepancy between what we say we're going to do in page 9 and what we say we're going to do on page 14? Maybe that would help us.
Yeah. I wanted to give you, I went through the latest draft and left in my proposal on page 9, which is that the city makes up the difference, because I knew there would be objection from the taxing jurisdictions. And honestly, it's probably a traffic and roadway project. That's the last project to the trough, so to speak. So that would probably be something we would be making up anyway. On page 14, that's what the developer has proposed because they see the ad valorem increment, I think, as a stable source of funds to make up that difference. And so that's why you see their proposal and you see my proposal.
Okay.
And so that's what's at issue.
Could I ask if, okay, so the two concerns that I heard could be addressed by the committee saying, we're okay with the proposed changes to the project plan, but we want that parenthetical statement taken out on page 14 that says, or such longer period as may be required. And we want the word unique added on page 12. Costs are needed to support a unique retailer entertainment user. If you were to do that, would that be an acceptable motion?
Yes, you can do that. It will require a negotiation with the developer.
Understood.
But like I said, on the funding piece, the objection is not to the city funding it, it's just wanting to make sure that the funds are in place to do so if needed. Unique could be part of the motion. That's going to be subject to agreement by the developer because this was a negotiated term.
But the other part of if it's city or ad valorem is not, we can just make that call and move forward.
The MOU requires that the developer and the city work together to draft the project plan. But the developer is not, their concern is not who's paying for the shortfall, it's just making sure it gets paid.
Okay.
If there is a shortfall, and so that's the concern there, and that's why you see two different forms of the language. And so if you all say, we approve this subject to maybe the unique change and the increment ending with the 2019 assessments, then what I will do is go back to the developer and say, how can we create some assurance in here that if there is a shortfall, the city will make up that difference? Or is there another way to address any shortfall that there may be?
So we
It's just
definitely
a-
have to make the recommendation because there's two different things in this document.
Right, and again, I did that and highlighted them so you would see the two proposals.
So we could say yes or no on each one, and when we get to 3, we can say, I guess, yes, assuming that these things get put in the document.
Yeah.
And that would get us through this process, so we don't have to reconvene and have all these.
Well, I sensed hesitation on Nick's part on the 350,000. So does that make you whole? Is that 100% of where you need to be in order to end this thing? Does it address all your issues?
Yeah, so the answer is I don't know. I've had a passing conversation with Bria once, I think, and just one off that this was a proposal. I haven't seen it. I want the aquatic center, don't get me wrong. You know, I think that's something we talked about a long time ago. We need it. We have a great swimming program. But I can't answer that question because I don't know. You know, making us whole is, I think, you know, 750+ thousand a year. I'll go back to 3.5 years ago when I started sitting in here. The thing I have asked for is, if it does come to an end, I need a runway. I need a runway of a year so I can at least plan for it, because any loss in funding affects my teachers and the kids in the classroom, and I have to be able to adjust.
And I think council, being huge supporters of education, especially public education, that's why they wanted to put in the 350,000 on top of that.
Yeah, and
runway.
that's, so if it's that, and then, once again, I don't know what it's gonna cost. I know 8 years ago or whatever, there was some talk about a possible MOU between the district at some number, and I'm sure things have changed. But we haven't seen anything like here it is. So I can't answer, that's an unanswerable question for me on making us whole. What does that mean? And the money we're not spending yet anyway, so.
And nothing has changed as far as the MOU idea, we just haven't moved forward with it. Council last night approved a contract for the design of the senior center, the indoor aquatics, and the multi-sport facility. And so pending this, you know, identifying the UNP as the location for those facilities, we'll be moving forward with that. But I wasn't involved in those initial conversations, but it looked like what we were talking about then was a $50,000 a year contribution. So my
I
thinking
wasn't,
was,
yeah, I
and
wasn't
you weren't
in,
here
I
either,
was in
right?
that spot at that time, so.
So 350,000 is about a 7-year offset of that contribution,
If that becomes the.
if that was the contribution, right? And there's a lot of moving parts.
So
And
it doesn't reflect
So-
revenue, it
Yeah.
offsets future expenses.
Yeah, it offsets future, doesn't replace any current revenue.
Okay, I have a proposal and tell me if this would get it done. Can we move, as this body, can we move to ask the city to strongly negotiate with the developer, to put the word unique in there, and to adopt, I guess what's on 14 as opposed to 9? No, on 9, and delete what's highlighted on page 14.
yes, I just delete the parenthetical on page 14.
Okay.
I highlighted the
Parenthetical.
whole sentence, but I think it's just the parenthetical that's the issue.
And is that enough to ask you to strongly negotiate with the developer? Because we can't dictate as this body that we want that language in there. Is that,
You could,
would that accomplish anything? And then we could go to a vote, assuming that, or-
approval subject to, maybe?
or we could do it that way, where it's
And
approval
then if we
subject
don't
to.
get an agreement, we would come back.
How does everybody feel about that? Does that help us? That gets a lot closer. I don't know what that is.
Be your recommendation, right? Because see, then.
Yeah, and that would get us to the next hump where then you all could go to planning commission, right?
I hope so.
Would that get you over the hump where this can keep moving and go to planning commission?
Yes, if we get agreement on the language that you've approved. If not, we would come back.
So is your feeling that the developers aren't concerned again about who's paying for the difference as long as the difference get paid?
If there's adequate assurance, it will.
So adding unique is fine, I suppose, but it comes down to the city manager's interpretation of unique. So I don't know how helpful that is, and I would hate to disrupt months and months and months and months of
And
negotiations.
I think I said that is not my goal
Yeah.
at all.
Oh, I know.
But I will tell you, I think that if we have a retail user that is not already in, I think if I was the city manager or working that office, I would rather have a descriptive word in there, because costs needed to support a retail or entertainment user that is not located in Norman is vague in my humble opinion. If I'm the only one that thinks that, that's okay
No, I
too.
think that recommendation would be supported by council, because again, we're very opposed to cannibalization.
That's the language that has always been used with this
So-
committee. I just don't see it in this document, is what has me concerned. I have notes and notes from all these different meetings, and the word unique has always been used and described. I have it, I mean, I won't go through there, but
Did that word come up in the negotiation and you felt like the developers didn't go for it, or?
Honestly, I don't recall for
Okay.
sure. Again, it may just be me thinking a user that doesn't already exist or a type of use that doesn't already exist is unique. So,
but it doesn't say exist. Well, okay, located as
entertainment,
exist.
on the entertainment.
But
piece is
but
what-
retail, it doesn't specify.
Right, and like I said, that's because that's harder to say that, if you sell clothes, you're not unique. But what if it's what retail user could we have that is unique, I guess? And so that's why it's more focused on direct
Well,
cannibalization.
okay, we have academy. Can Dick's Sporting Good come in under this language?
Yes.
If all of these other components, it wouldn't be a retail user already and located in Norman.
Right,
We
so
don't have a
Dick's could come in.
If they met all those cells.
Would that be
yes.
considered cannibalization to some people that really have this issue?
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be cannibalization, because
Indirect.
my
Or
understanding.
it would be
It'd be that, yeah, cannibalization is we tear from other parts in our own town.
right, so we would be tearing from another business has very similar. Isn't the goal of this to protect that?
Yeah, and through the years, we've had several protections in place for the sales tax, the transfer adjustment and that was for direct, move from outside the district and within, target. I'm blanking on some of the others, Anthony.
That came in that weren't here.
No, that came in from outside,
Was
from
Chili's
within
one?
Norman. Ulta,
Chili's was.
Michael's.
so we've had
right here.
protection for those. The essentially the sales that they created in their previous locations still continue to go to the general fund. That's been in place from the beginning too, and that was the goal initially, I think, as far as what we could impact with the way we put in those protections was more the direct
Right, but
cannibalization because of what you're struggling with.
yeah, but the TIF's gonna be gone, so that doesn't,
Right.
that's not a thing anymore.
Right.
I mean,
It'll still be in
the
place.
protection of where the
for
tax dollars
purpose
go
of
doesn't matter
spending
anymore.
funds.
Now we just have two stores that look a lot alike. And I gotta pick, do I buy Adidas tennis shoes here or here? And that doesn't help either one of those retailers stay in Norman.
Yeah,
It just
remember,
splits their
the only
business.
question is about incentives. Dick's
Okay.
Sporting Goods could build a store right next door to Academy right now if they're not asking for incentives.
Okay?
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm hearing is the two issues are that language between the city pays or the county, ad valorem pays, or the use of the word unique. But these are major changes in all of the other areas, and we seem to be focusing on these two little things.
I got a couple more
Yes, just
questions,
one.
issues
No
to
problem.
talk about.
Excellent.
So, thank you. The, our TIF attorney, and he's still researching it, but one of the questions he has is that the city choosing to end its increment of sales tax jeopardizes the completion of these projects. And so their choice to do that before it goes through this process, is that not a major amendment change because you're jeopardizing the completion of the TIF projects at that point?
We
And-
have not ended the increment. If this is adopted, the increment will be ended effective June 30th, the way it's written. But as of today, it's not been ended because you all haven't acted
Well,
and
I
it
thought
hasn't gone through the
council
process.
voted to end it.
They directed that we budget based on it ending, but we have not ended that allocation because it's subject to this process.
It's complicated stuff. It really is. I appreciate all of you guys being willing to serve on this and hash it out. What else?
So if you do end this, you're gonna refund back out of the TIF?
No.
June 30th?
I didn't hear the question.
Oh,
Since you said it's gonna end June 30th, but you're still paying into the TIF fund currently. So when this is adopted, according to this at the back, the effective date is the date this is adopted, but you're gonna refund yourself the amount you paid into the TIF to June 30th?
Not under this language. We have made an apportionment in July and we've made an apportionment in August. Under the language that the businesses collected those sales taxes in May and June. So no, we wouldn't be refunding any money that we've already apportioned.
Okay. But as of, all right, then if this agreement is not dated in effect, we're gonna backdate to June 30th?
Yes, it will be effective June 30, but remember that the sales taxes that were collected at Academy in May are received by the city in July.
Right.
The sales that are collected at Academy in June are received by the city in August, an apportionment in August. So under the language that's here, those apportionments that were made for July receipts to the city and August receipts to the city will be apportioned to the TIF fund.
Okay, I want to clarify a question because I want to make sure I'm processing what you said about incentives. Under this plan, if Dick's Sporting Goods, as a hypothetical example, wants to come in, can we incentivize them to do that with Academy sitting out there already?
if they meet all of these criteria. It would
Which,
have to be located in the Lifestyle Center land, that's north of Crest.
where's
south
the
of-
criteria?
Page
There
12.
with
Okay, the A, B, C,
21
A through E? Okay.
So it would have to be located
So
in
there,
that one
okay. So
particular area.
let's
It
assume
could
they're
not be
there.
Next to Academy. So it would have to be in that area. The cost would have to support a user not already located in Norman. Academy's not a retail user already located in Norman. They would have to meet those sales per square foot and show us that they've met those in communities with demographics similar to ours. And it would have to be part of a parcel development plan that incorporates urban design elements of walkability and connectivity as determined by the ARB, which is the Architectural Review Board.
So, if I understand all those, that answer would be yes.
Yes, if they can meet all
Developer
of
could
those.
incentivize something like a Dick's to come in, be in that area, pretty close to Academy.
Yeah.
To play
It's not a
devil's
user
advocate, if
already
we got a
located.
Trader Joe's right north of Crest, nobody would care because Trader
Well,
Joe's,
the
you know what I
groceries-
mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's
But that's unique.
difficult
To me,
thing.
that Crest,
still a grocery
Crest
store.
and Trader Joe's are unique. Well, that's why I want to put a definition in there.
Yeah, and it's
But
a
is
judgment
unique
call
enough?
depending on.
I don't
the
know.
example.
That's the language that the city staff has been giving us the whole time. That's where I came up with the
Because
word
if I put on my
unique.
lawyer hat, I could make an argument that there are products at Dick's that are unique compared
You
to what
can,
is
which is
sold.
why I brought up yesterday, is there a definition of unique? I mean, that's what started me down this road,
And we
because that's the
actually-
language that's been used in the
We had
slides
a
and,
conference call about that yesterday afternoon, that and other things.
Yeah.
Talked through it, but I don't have a solution.
Okay,
for
well,
that.
it ultimately falls, if I understand, on the city manager's office
Mm-hmm.
to decide on that, so.
Because yeah,
He
they would
doesn't
make an
think it
argument
meets
we're
all these
unique.
criteria,
Or
then they
not
would
even
Well,
that.
unique's
go
not
to
in
Yeah,
there.
not even
That's
that.
what I'm saying, there's, you know,
I mean, user not already located in Norman, and that the unique was used to reference the entertainment option, so it would have to be an option that is not already located in Norman.
we've been in meetings where unique was used for retail also. I'm just, that's where I got that word.
Okay.
I think if the city manager's
I
office,
would kind of like to have that in there.
okay, I was gonna say, it's kind of really whether they're comfortable or not. I mean, but again, I mean, I say that, then we end up back trying to figure out if something was,
Well, it'll be a judgment call either
Yeah.
way. The Trader Joe's Crest example,
Yeah.
you know.
I don't want to
Dick's
tighten
or
things up too
Academy.
much.
Yeah.
I'm very aware that I don't want to do that.
Well, fortunately, we have a lot of very passionate and educated citizens following this issue. And should something want to come in that they don't feel is unique and meets the terms, I am confident we would hear about it. So it's a different ballgame than it was before, for sure.
But that relies on, I mean, again, my initial question, if we have an opportunity at this point, it's super easy to pop a word in there and it doesn't change or slow down this process, that would be my recommendation. If it changes and slows down a process that has been going on for years and we're this close, I'm not gonna blow that up. And if I'm the only one that is concerned about this,
That's a valid
you
concern.
know, I don't wanna blow it up either, but I don't mean to get stuck on one word.
But you did say we could finalize the document and then take action on it, and that would give him time.
Yes, yeah.
So what I'm hearing is we can agree that we would want the city to make up the difference if there was a difference.
Ad Valorem.
Best poker faces ever. No nods or anything. That was a question, hoping for feedback.
Yes. I think
Okay.
I can agree to that.
Okay. All right, one down. Next, the unique part. Do we want to suggest that that language is added and ask Catherine to go back and negotiate?
So
Yes.
the difference here is it would be added to retail as well as entertainment.
It seems like the only question is really, does adding unique give the city manager more discretion to make his own judgment call? Whereas right now, it seems more open. Not that, it's just the,
Throw it out there.
You guys can see why it's taken so long to negotiate with me.
Well, I'm just trying to
There's a
get
lot
us
of
moving forward.
issues.
We've got one of them down. The next one, do we want to recommend that that language be added and move on? Or are we good with as is and with the previous recommendation?
I guess when you're asking, we've got one down, one to go, where we're gonna go with this. So I scanned all this and sent it to our TIF attorney yesterday.
Mhm.
He is furiously going through it, trying to make sure that we represent the citizens of Cleveland County appropriately in this. And so I don't know that I can answer, is that it? Is it those two and we're done? I don't know.
Well, the answer for me is that we don't know what the developers are gonna say. I mean, and I guess, Catherine, if you have feedback there that, based on all your negotiations, I'm comfortable moving through those motions and going ahead and giving you the authority to do your damnedest to get it done. If that's realistic, and I guess that's where I need y'all, to make sure you've been in these negotiations and we haven't.
I think on the retail user, that is going to be a challenge. Just because, what does unique mean? Does that mean we can't have another store that sells clothing or another store that sells groceries? Or, how far do you take that? And so I think that would be challenging, because just about any retail user I know they've worked with to locate in the lifestyle center, on some level, sells similar things to other retail users in Norman, whether it's clothes, jewelry, whatever.
Yeah. I was trying to
So
think of
that-
something
that's-
that's not sold in Norman right now.
Surprising you would pick up on that word if that's going to be a sticking point.
Certainly lives down any dispensaries.
Yeah. My goal is to prevent a big blow up in 6 months when XYZ store's coming in and everybody disagrees that I'm just trying to think through everything. That's my goal. I don't care if we have Dixon.
Well, and the city manager, if the city manager denies something, what's the recourse then?
They could come forward to council with a development agreement if the city manager doesn't believe that the project meets all of the criteria.
So he could just push it on to council all the way around and be like, nope, go talk to council.
Yeah, if
it's
there's
a
something
tough call.
if it's a tough call.
Then you
is
got a majority
possibility.
vote. So that makes me feel better.
Yeah, and that,
I mean, I
we
like that.
wanted to put that in there so that all of the pressure is not on the city manager.
Yeah.
And
Especially our new
to
city
help us
manager.
if something comes forward that we just haven't contemplated,
Yeah.
but that the community wants.
I said in the beginning, this is not something that's gonna hold out my vote or anything. If it was something easy to change, it was something I thought we should openly consider. We've now openly considered it. If we're all sitting here in a room in 18 months, because it's a thing, we'll say, gosh, I wish we'd done that.
We'll just blame Daryl.
We don't,
Blame Daryl.
we don't know what's gonna happen, but we've got the city manager that can make a call, we've got this council that can make a call, there's other things that can happen in the meantime, so I think it's safe. It's not ideal, but, I don't know that we're at ideal anymore, so. Anyways, I can drop my.
So as I mentioned yesterday and have made clear, this is my first time walking us through this process with project plan amendments, and I know it's yours too.
Yeah, it was part of the 2008 amendment, but it was quite a bit different because it wasn't a change in the amount.
I just want to make sure that we haven't wasted everyone's time here today and take the action that is needed. We can either vote it down, we can vote it forward. Do we need to vote it? That's what I keep coming back to.
Yeah, in looking through the statute, it's really these three questions that are on the screen. Does it affect the initial approval of the project plan? When the committee under the Local Development Act looks at an approval of a project plan in the early stages, it's looking at the effect on the taxing entities, the appropriateness of the approval of the proposed plan and project. And then will it have a financial impact? Certainly it will either way. Either if we end it tomorrow, most of the taxing jurisdictions will see a benefit with the collections in the next year. But it affects the school differently. So there's absolutely an impact no matter what we do, but it's a different impact depending on the jurisdiction. And that may be something we want to note moving forward.
When we went through this originally, we went through all these
Were
meetings.
you on the original committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good.
The final goal came back before the committee. In other words, it wasn't a draft. The final, everything,
So do we need to,
back through this committee, went through planning, and back to council. In other words, these discussions like this, we had. Of course, we had the citizens committee in addition to. But all these drafts were put together, then the final document, when it was put together, came back before this particular committee.
and is this different because this is a settlement, yet we still have to go through the things to get final approval of said settlement? Is that the difference that we're missing
She
here?
just said we can get a final.
But it'll still be subject to approval by the developer for settlement purposes. And that is unique. It's unique to have project plan amendments. I talked to some folks in Oklahoma City, said, you know, how has this process looked for you all? And they said, we haven't really amended. So,
Norman's
not very
special.
helpful.
And the previous amendments have been finalized and then came for this committee and then back.
But
Yeah. It's what makes it, the settlement aspect makes this more difficult for staff, but your role is not changed.
Right.
So, Catherine, when will you have a final agreement with the developer? Is there a final meeting date set or anything?
We have a conference call at least once a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times. I imagine we'll have our regular call on Friday. Part of what we've been needing really to understand what the shortfall, if any, looks like and how it could be addressed is the numbers from the county, which I heard Brenda say they're expecting those to be certified Thursday or
Tomorrow.
today.
We have the numbers.
We have it, yeah, the numbers
We
are
asked
there.
for them, I've been asking for them for weeks.
Okay.
So it
I
sounds
also
like
have
we're only a week
uncertified
ahead.
numbers.
And
Right, so we'll get those numbers, I think, this week then, it sounds like, and that will help us finalize that approach for the funding.
And I think what makes this whole document, these 14 pages or whatever, are the revised project plan. Not just one page with the projects listed. So until all of these are complete and cleaned up,
Because we technically don't have the amendments because they're not final.
Yeah, I mean, everything in here is final except for that one piece. Everybody's agreed to everything in here except that one piece about potential funding shortfalls.
dang it, they shouldn't have put draft on each page.
I couldn't figure out how to do the watermark that way, Derry. I just don't work Microsoft Word that well. But that's why I highlighted it, to show that those are really what's at issue.
So if everything is agreed to, except the one thing that we seem to agree on, can we move it forward with that recommendation to guide you finalizing these settlements?
Sure.
Well, hot damn, let's do it. Who's with me? Or do we vote? Like, I don't know how this
Motion
works.
I mean, probably a motion on each question if you all are ready to vote.
But do we make recommendations in our answers or just a simple yes, no?
I mean, like I said, the 2008 amendment was not a great example because it just said, yes, you'll have a financial impact. I think you want more explanation here. But based on the discussions, I can draft something, I think based on what you all have told me. Obviously, the impact to the schools is different from the impact to the other taxing jurisdictions, but
So we don't need to vote.
it's up to you all. I mean, a vote needs to happen before it can move forward. It's just whether you do it now or whether you want me to go back and take your feedback and try and finalize it and bring it back to you, and I can write a resolution maybe that sets out some of these things that we've talked about for these 3 questions. I've seen it done both ways where it's just reflected through independent motions in the minutes.
It would be awkward to do a motion in the way this is phrased.
I agree. That's why I'm not able to wrap my head around this.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how you would move to say that no, the district is still eligible. How do you
Do you
motion
move to
something
say all questions have been considered, go to the planning commission?
I think it would be a motion to confirm that the proposed amendments do not affect the eligibility of the proposed district. A motion that the committee finds the amendments do not negatively affect the committee's, or however you want to say that, committee's initial approval of the project plan. And then a motion that the committee finds that these amendments will have a financial impact on the taxing jurisdictions, recognizing that the impact will differ based on the jurisdiction that's impacted. And maybe that's where you want to add in a recommendation that the Ad Valorem increment end with the 2019 assessments.
Did you say no to 2?
Yeah, I mean, you guys haven't really talked about that, but
Well, I think, obviously, we're not doing as much as what we initially set out to do, so there's no question that it's going to affect their initial approval of the project plan. I'm not saying, I mean, that's what council wants to do, but I think the answer is,
The answer is
yeah, it
yes.
does.
But would you approve the amendments, I guess? That's where you would need to approve something to move it forward.
Well, so we're not sitting here staring at each other. How about number one? The motion would be, do these proposed amendments affect
The motion would be to confirm
that the eligibility of proposed district is not affected?
Right, by the
Yeah,
amendments.
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same side. Okay, that one was easy.
That was the easy one.
Nailed it. All right, number two. The motion would be,
That the amendments affect the committees, that these amendments affect the committee's initial approval of the project plan.
does it need to be in the affirmative or the negative?
Can't be negative.
Can't be
Yeah,
negative.
it has to be affirmative.
It has to be
Okay.
affirmative.
And I think we have to determine, because like you said, we haven't gone into that one very deeply, the appropriateness of those amendments.
The amendments do affect the committee's initial approval of projects.
And we have not discussed the appropriateness of them, which is part of what the statute says we're to do.
That's not what the question is.
That's not what the statute.
I understand that's not what she has written up there as a
If you
question.
look under there, it says.
But it
this-
says, yes, appropriateness is part of what she wrote, and that's what the statute says,
part of the local
is that we're to
development.
determine the appropriateness of that as well.
And so that would be, that's what I kind of touched on earlier, is there were lots of different changes here and we haven't really talked about them.
Correct.
I touched on a few, and that was more the detailed presentation we had yesterday. We can go through those. They deal with it's the whole presentation. The traffic and roadway improvements, hotel conference center and cultural facilities, legacy park, lifestyle center, and economic development, and those were all covered in the presentation. Do we want to go through them one by one? Because that seemed to be what I gathered was the least contentious part. What would the committee be comfortable doing to move forward?
So can I read under the statute, it says the review committee recommendation shall include the analysis used to project revenues over the life of the project plan, which I guess we have some question, hopefully we'll be finding out some of that here very soon, the effect on the taxing entities and the appropriateness of the approval of the proposed plan and project. And that's what the statute says we are supposed to do.
Okay, so what we have here is not exact statute language. You're reading statute language, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is just a summary. Right.
Right, so.
So-
The increment collections to date, this is that comparison, we're on track with Ad Valorem. And so I think the question for the financial impact is, would this change that potential Ad Valorem generation? Of course, the city's infusing the area with a $22.5 million project, although tax exempt. I think it does bring in more development that would pay taxes. And so I'm not sure, what impact that would have on the if any, on the collections projected forward. Sales tax, of course, would continue. The idea all along, as I said yesterday, is really just to tee the district up for the development, so that all the taxing jurisdictions get the benefit from it. And so, to me, looking at what the changes and how it's been spread across multiple projects rather than just eliminating one large project, helps lessen that impact, and still manages to tee up the area, particularly with the public improvements like the traffic and roadway improvements that we need, things like that.
I agree. I feel like all the projects are still there. They're just morphed to better fit what people wanted, especially with adding the entertainment to the retail part for the lifestyle center. The public art, I thought that was a creative amendment because we got rid of that, but then the Norman Forward projects bring public art, so it was a great way to balance it. So those are my thoughts on the amendments, is all the projects are still there. We've just shortened them to save everybody money when we end this TIF, except you. But $350,000. So.
Don't know much about it, so.
So do we want to go through all of the project plans if that's where we're stuck on step 2?
Well, I don't know if we're stuck or not. I mean, nobody's really said how they feel.
I know it's a
It's
quiet
been
crowd.
pretty silent.
I know, I agree. Poker faces.
I think I don't know how it affects you in the county. I mean, I really don't have any sense of how it affects you financially or any other way.
That's what we're trying to determine
And I
right now.
know that's what you're trying to figure out, I understand that. But as far, and I do know how it affects the schools, and I feel that we've tried to address it as best we can. So I think the rest of it, in terms of appropriateness, I think it's an appropriate change. I don't, I think those are good changes and reasonable changes, considering the situation.
I don't want to be singled out though, so when you say the county, all these others as well.
Well,
as
I
Ad
understand,
Valorem
I understand that,
districts.
but you're the commissioner, so.
We're the one that's got an attorney that's trying to figure that out right now, feverishly.
But the rest of them haven't said anything, so I don't know where they're at. I mean, how do you get a sense of what we need to do if no one will?
So let me ask about the 350. Is that basically just a 7-year waiver of having to pay anything, and then you guys just stuck a dollar figure to it? Or,
It was-
I mean, because we just don't have to pay something for 7 years, and then we have to pick up at whatever rate that was after that? And I'm just curious.
Yeah.
These are questions I would ask if we were having this discussion, because I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't-
And
I mean-
that was based on the numbers that we got from you all, that the impact of having the TIF versus not having the TIF is a $700,000 per year impact. And
Well,
so,
it goes up every year, because like
Knowing-
this year's like 800, I think.
It didn't collect in that much, it was
Okay.
closer to the 750.
750.
so the increment, the ad valorem increment will still, because we're getting the 2019 assessments payable in 2020, that still gives you next year at the
Correct,
same
so that
rate.
runway I get. I guess I'm
And-
talking
and it
about the
would've-
aquatics.
Yeah, it would have naturally expired in
Yeah,
about
which-
18 months, so
which
that's
is-
half of the 700,000.
I mean, so that's why I don't know. Yeah, I love
The
the
additional
runway.
6 months, is that right?
Right.
Okay.
That, the 50,000 was a number 8 years ago, just a hypothetical number of what it would cost. Because
Right.
like right now for OU, I think we pay 17 a year or somewhere in there.
Yeah,
And
if
so
it's
it's
less,
going
then
up
it's
3
a-
times the amount.
And it's a
So-
longer offset. It just, I mean, we don't know what the final amount is, we haven't agreed to
Correct,
that, but.
yeah. So that's why when it's that number, I'm like, I can't even.
So if
have
I
no
understand
comment.
correctly, the school district gets its year 1 runway, which is
That's
what
what
you had
that's what
always
I've
asked for.
Absolutely.
And then there is still 6 months when the TIF would have ended anyways. And then you're gonna get that. You're gonna get the 350.
Right, it's just through an
Because you're
offset
not gonna be
because
getting
we
the ad
can't
valorem.
cut a check to the school.
And I guess whether you use it for a pool or not that's,
Well, actually, we won't get it. They'll
It would
just,
just be an offset from their purchase.
so that's why I'm saying it's
However long that-
basically,
Yeah,
just don't pay for 6 years.
yeah,
or 7
6
years.
months, yeah.
Years.
years, yeah.
Yeah.
I just, I
Is
think
that-
we have our first aquatic meeting in a few days.
I was
That's
gonna
all.
say, shouldn't you contractually agree to that?
Yeah, so I haven't,
Let's-
I haven't,
yeah.
I don't know what all that includes. Because
Yeah.
when we met initially a while back, when it came to the aquatic center, we had some expectations that our teams, our coaches, and people wanted in that when it came to Norman Public Schools versus the community usage, primary tenant, all those things. That we still don't know. So,
But the public school system is getting what you asked for, which was the 1 year
I
runway,
asked for
right?
1 year. That's
Okay.
why when they
You're
keep
comfortable with
throwing
that? Okay.
350 at me,
I
I'm
just wanna make
like,
sure I'm not, yeah.
just knowing it was going to come to an end, I'm like, you just got to give me a runway.
Yeah, okay. So, not ideal, but at least got you where you can put
We're
it.
used to it.
Yeah, I know. I just want to make sure it's clean. Sorry, I gotta put it in like layman's terms.
Any
Jeanette, do
other?
you know what your superintendent's feelings are on this?
Well, probably because he didn't get the information till this morning, we didn't have time to review. And we just got invited yesterday, so we did talk about it this morning. And so,
I did meet with him in early July.
he
and
did say that.
We learned today that, or yesterday, that maybe the email address we've been using that we had used earlier, I think, was not working, but we went through all of this information in early July because he was new at that time and Jane was still here,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and I didn't know about it for whatever reason, whether it was my fault or not, yesterday's meeting. So.
Yeah, that, I heard it at another meeting.
It's a meeting request, but I don't know who.
Me neither.
We got it fixed, I think.
I think so. So for the question 2, essentially, I'm going to summarize here, correct me if I'm wrong, the motion would be to approve the amendments to the project plans as presented. Or, I mean,
Or subject to,
This is just asking us if the amendment's affected. It's not asking us to approve.
that's what I mean.
right, so do you still approve, I guess? is
Oh,
another way
okay,
of
that's
saying
better.
that. Maybe that makes more sense.
I think it's still, and Bob, this is a great question for you. I mean, you were on the vision for what it was. All of those projects are still there. Like Catherine said, we cut from several to shorten it and save everybody money, but I would argue the initial spirit is there, but I wasn't there on those conversations.
So your question to me is,
You were, at least in 2008, correct?
right,
So I feel like you may be in the best position to answer that, sir.
answer which question?
If we're still meeting the spirit of the project plan. Do we still approve of the project plan at hand with these amendments? Am I getting closer? I think if I say it a few more times, I might.
Well, you're pretty close. You've done away with the extended landscaping. You've done away with public art, and that was kind of one of the big arguments of the deal. Overall, are you pretty much there? Yes, probably. As far as the projects are concerned, trying to. You know, some people it takes a little longer for things to be recalled. With me, it takes years.
Oh,
I think by changing some of the things for retail, I'm not sure that those are in the spirit of what was put there. Bing's Theater was one of the deals that were there, and you've tightened up the retail part, which makes it more difficult. So I wouldn't think that meets the initial. We felt at the time we had it pretty restrictive. We worried about cannibalization more than we worried about anything else. It didn't have to be unique, it didn't have to be this, it didn't have to be that. It was more a worry of cannibalization than what went.
And just to add on to that, all the sales tax revenues collected that we're talking about here is everything that's been collected to date and not spent have been subject to those protections that you
Right.
all wisely put in that project plan, and that was the transfer adjustment, and that was the average annualized growth rate.
But like I say, we were worried about cannibalization.
Right.
But when you strengthen this about what can come now, you added new rules. That's not part of the initial concept of what was going on there.
but we did leave retail in it, and we have got to adjust for the change in the retail market and how people shop and spend their monies. Experiential dollars benefit all of the tax partners, sales and ad valorem.
That's true, but you put more restrictions on what can be incentivized in the lifestyle
I would argue we expanded it because you've got retail and entertainment now.
The rules of what retail can go have changed.
Okay. And that was negotiated by the developers, though, that language.
The current language with those criteria, that was part of what was negotiated.
So they would agree, based on this agreement, with those changes to the retail part.
That's fine, but still, it's not the, you asked me, is it the initial? And
Okay.
my answer to you is no.
Okay.
Yeah, because you asked, are we staying in the spirit of what was initially? So that answer is no, but I'm not sure that's what's being asked of us.
It's not asking if it's in the spirit, it's asking
I
if it's
think because
appropriate.
that wouldn't be an appropriate question because the times have changed. I
Yeah.
mean, which is kind of where you're getting at. We're being asked, do the amendments affect the committee's initial approval? And, yeah, because they're different. And they
It's an
are
amendment.
different.
But as an attorney,
I'm
as when
not
I look
sure-
at this, it
I'm not
says
sure. I mean, I haven't read the
recommendations
exact-
shall include, the statute says, the analysis used to project revenues over the life of the project plan. I think those are coming in very quickly, and we will know, and that will give us a better idea over the life of the plan. The effect on the taxing entities, that's one of the questions, and the appropriateness of the approval of the proposed plan of the project. Those are questions that aren't
We
up
need to be
there,
looking at that exact
but it
statutory
says
language,
you
not
shall
just summary.
do
'cause we're
those
kind of-
things
Yeah.
as a review committee. And then it goes on to say, you may recommend that the project plan be approved, denied, or approved subject to conditions set forth by the committee.
I think it's prudent that we look at the exact statutory language and not, the summary of it, because we're getting hung up on details. I'm okay if we read that from the internet. I don't know that we have to have a pretty slide that says it all. But I think we should be relying on that exact language, because that's what the
Yeah.
statutes tell us to vote on.
Just trying to break it down so you
Yeah.
could have motions.
Yeah.
If
No, I-
overall we're ready
yeah.
to act today. That's fine.
Okay, so do we need to read the exact language and make a motion on that?
I mean, it's these findings and then approval of the amendments, denial of the amendments, or approval with conditions.
So I would make a motion to approve the amendments to the project plan with removing the ad valorem language and inserting the city language to make up for any deficit of project plan costs. I'm just looking for the right language to keep us going.
Can you say it again?
Hope you were writing that down. Make a motion to approve the amendments to the project plan with removing the language of ad valorem tax and inserting the city funds to make up any deficit that may come from project plan costs.
I don't have any problem with what you're saying, but I don't think that's what the statute didn't ask us to approve this plan. And Catherine told us this was a negotiated settlement document.
You have to make these findings, and then, as Derry read, it's an approval of what's recommended, it's denial of recommended, or it's
Okay, it is?
approval of
Okay.
what's recommended with
But
conditions. So
I'm
that's why I
not
was
understanding the
saying-
statute probably without looking at it, so
That's
go
why I
ahead.
was saying that could be a condition of the approval if that's the direction you all wanted to move in.
I guess, can you read just that section of the statute to me
You want me
again?
to read that again?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I just think that
The
we need the
review
exact
committee
statute.
recommendations shall include the analysis used to project revenues over the life of the project plan, the effect on the taxing entities, and the appropriateness of the approval of the proposed plan and project. The review committee may recommend that the project plan be approved, denied, or approved subject to conditions set forth by the committee. So if you ask me to
We
go through
may.
each of those questions, I can. So
It says we may approve it.
what it says we shall do include the analysis used to project revenues over the life of the project plan. I don't know yet, those are coming in, and I will be very intrigued to see how that's negotiated. The effect on the taxing entities, we are working to determine what that is and working with our attorney to do that. And the appropriateness of the approval of the proposed plan and project, I think that goes along with how it affects us. I would determine the appropriateness.
We've determined that when we quit collecting the tax increment, the money fully goes back to the taxing jurisdictions. Do we need the full amount?
That's in the statute. I don't think you need a motion for that.
62, Oklahoma statute 855.
That's gonna be easy to read.
I mean, let's just break it down. So we shall review, okay, the review committee recommendations shall include the analysis used to project revenues over the life of the project plan. So have we done that? Yes.
We have that information.
The
Through
effect.
the life of, I don't want to skip that one that quick.
Okay.
Through the life of the project plan. Have we done that through the whole life of it? Do we know what it's going to be, or is that not what
We
we are?
have the life of the original project plan that was considered by the committee in 2006. And then because we have a firm end date for the amendments, we know that information too, and that was on one of those slides. We don't know the exact dollar figure for ad valorem, but we know it's about $2 million additional to what was shown on that slide. So 13 million and some change.
So that's, the
So
question
that's-
is there going to be enough that's going to come in through that ad valorem?
We have about 15 million in the bank now. So that additional ad valorem would be what got us up to 17 million.
And this is just asking us if we included that in our analysis, which we have. There's no way we're going to know that exact number.
Right, I mean, we have a pretty good estimate, as Anthony said, but we'll know something much closer to the exact number probably Friday, sounds like.
That still is going to an estimate though.
Yeah.
Right, so that shouldn't change what we're voting on, right?
We wouldn't know how much is going to come in 2019.
Yeah.
And the committee said it's an appropriate analysis of how to do
Yeah.
it.
Right,
That's why
and
I
that's
have
all this is
information,
asking us.
Yeah, comparing where we are now to what was projected in 2006. And then
So-
showing you what we've collected so far.
I don't see where knowing those exact numbers changes what we are voting on. And I feel like we are using that information in our analysis. You're telling us it's roughly 2 million, we have, is that, somebody help me out?
I'm with you.
Okay, am I reading that correctly?
I think you
Okay.
are. I appreciate your analysis.
Well, I'm just up here close to the slide, so I'm,
It's easy.
and not sure which glasses to wear, but I'm getting there. Okay, can I move on to the, after the comma, the next? Okay, so we are, this committee shall consider and make its findings, blah, blah, blah. The review shall include, and then I'm going to skip to the next kind of, let's say, number 2, the effect on the taxing entities and the appropriateness of the approval of the proposed plan and the project. So our analysis needs to include the effect on the taxing entities, which we've talked a lot about, but you guys all represent one of those. I don't. I mean, except the general.
Well, I think
Y'all feel we've talked about that in our analysis? Is that what that's asking?
as the sales tax one, I'll throw out, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the ad valorems, but how it works is when this is ended, they get their full money back. It's pretty cut and dry.
We've analyzed the project revenues and we've analyzed the effect on the taxing entities. And then the next sentence says we may recommend the project plan approved. So I think we've done all that. Does anybody else think we haven't done all that?
I think we've done it.
Okay. So does that help?
Do we need to take a vote on that?
Yes.
Okay. Do we approve the project plan as amended? Is that the question we need to ask? Based on that
Yeah,
language?
That's one of the questions, I would say.
So you need a motion?
Yes.
I move we approve the project plan as amended.
Second?
No, oh, sorry, no. Or don't, because we need to put the language in there with, about page 14.
Yes.
Yep.
The project plan as amended
Subject
with
to-
removal, or subject to,
Subject to, yeah, we just didn't finish it.
So is this a project plan or not?
Yeah. This is.
So-
This is the amendment to the project.
Okay,
Yeah.
that you're,
So,
So,
we're negotiating now.
Subject to removal of the parenthetical statement on page 14.
on page 14.
or you could say subject to the ad valorem increment ending after the collection of the 2019 assessments. And then that'll require an adjustment in page 9 and page 14, but that will cover both of those.
I think I'm
But
comfortable
that
with
doesn't
her.
include then the city covering the cost.
Yeah, does this, we,
It was just one of the
it's
sticking
already in
points.
there,
Yeah, I mean, that's in there on page 9.
But it's not on page 14, is it?
so we would only be amending page 14.
I'm encouraging you to amend, if you want to amend it, to subject the condition that the ad valorem increment, sounds like you all want it to end with the 2019 assessments. And if you want to add the condition that the city set forth more specifically how it would fund any shortfall, you could do that. But language will have to be changed on page 9 and page 14 to accommodate both of those.
Can we change it to
Rather
the
than-
city shall provide? Will, I guess will provides, okay. Okay,
Should
this,
say
so
drafting
this
of
sentence
fine.
is where, what you're talking about that covers the city part.
Right, page 9.
So page 9, the city will provide
Writing
additional
up
funds as
discussion.
needed. Is that, that's in there, on page 9.
All right.
It's already in there, yeah. So we would be adopting what's highlighted on page 9.
We're adopting what's highlighted on page 9 and changing what's on page 14.
Yes.
I think that, yeah.
So motion to adopt project plan as amended and end ad valorem tax increment in 2019.
Does it come back around and we see it finalized that before?
No, and that's the point that Bob was making earlier, is that it's still.
Well, we could put in the motion and no other changes or something.
Yeah, like I said, everything else in the
Just to move
document's
the ball
been
forward.
agreed to.
She said everything's
It's
done.
just the shortfall question, so.
Can we
You
put
all
in there
are
and
clear
no
that
additional changes?
You want, well, we couldn't move forward with additional changes without coming back to you all. Because what has to move forward to planning commission has to be what you all adopt. So if there are any changes, we will have to come back to you all.
I like that.
Okay, so that, does that make you feel okay?
I got lost.
Catherine, are you writing down the language of the motion or just notes?
Trying to get the language of the motion.
Okay,
I'm not
perfect.
sure how good it is, but.
Once we approve this here, I mean, I'll ask the whole, is my understanding, once we approve this here with the motion that we're playing with, no changes can be made without coming back to us?
Nothing substantive. I mean, there may be a comma here
Typo or
or
whatever,
something
yeah.
like that, but nothing substantive.
So does that get us over the draft hump?
I think you're obviously acting in the best interest of all of us, but I'm still at the point, we're still reviewing this and our attorneys are still looking at it. I'm concerned that he didn't know that the meeting was today, and so I don't have information we're still reviewing. So if that's the decision of the committee to move forward, then that's fine, but as far as me, I'm still trying to figure this out.
Thank you. Okay. Can you reread that, please?
Motion to approve the project plan as amended, subject to the condition that the ad valorem increment end with the collection of the 2019 assessments and that appropriate changes be made in the document to reflect said change. That,
Which again, to clarify, means the city picks up the tab and the TIF is ended and ad valorem, our partners save money there. Okay. Do you want to hand that? Do you want to remake that motion, or how do we want to do that?
I'll move. I mean, it can be defeated, but at least we got something to talk about. I'll make the motion.
Could you read it one more time?
motion to approve the project plan as amended, subject to the condition that the ad valorem increment end with the collection of the 2019 assessments and that appropriate changes be made to reflect such change.
Do we have a second?
I have a question. I thought we were gonna specifically say, adopt this language and delete. Like
Okay.
specifically delineate what was staying and what was going.
Fine with me.
So we don't have any,
can
that
do
way
either
it takes
way.
all subjective.
Yeah, we can do either way. I was just trying to simplify the motion, but
I'm sorry.
either way. It's fine. It's
You can tell I like specifics.
city will.
I just don't want to have
bear
anything
the
that we get hung
burdens,
up on
or-
and have to come
I
back.
withdraw my motion since there's no second. Would you want to redo it?
So, motion to approve project plan as amended. Page 9 will stay the same, right? So it's really page 14, so that would be section 10B. It's amended on the condition that section 10B. I'm talking faster than I can write, sorry.
Beth, are you throwing out your unique word?
What?
Are you throwing out unique?
Yeah, I
It's
get it.
section 10B,
I'll move by the time.
yeah, that's what I was struggling with. On the condition that the parenthetical in section 10B be removed. That solve it? Be removed from the final document. And that parenthetical again says, and it's regarding the ad valorem increment, or such longer period as may be required to generate sufficient funds to pay all remaining authorized project costs as provided in section 6A.
So the city will take that up and not put Ad Valorem Partners on the hook for any deficit that there may be.
And if we could, just to be clear that this change can be made without coming back, but that the city provide
Additional funds as needed to meet the
additional
deficit?
funds as needed.
Okay.
And of course, that's in section, page 9 anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to think, there may be a change on page 9, just to provide additional assurance or identification of where those funds come from.
I guess Catherine also identified as the revised draft dated 8/25/19. So we don't have any confusion. Fixed draft.
The part 2 is for the project plan amendments. Clarifying who picks up the tab. Anything else we need to add to have everyone comfortable with the language?
And after this project plan still goes to planning committee to be reviewed and approved.
And there's public hearings,
And
isn't
there's 2
that?
public hearings. It's going to get touched by 3 more
Well, the
people.
planning commission is sort of a public hearing.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what that one's gonna be like.
Right.
I'll be sure to attend.
Lots of opportunities to weigh in.
Thank God it's not in September.
All right. Will you read it to us one more time?
It's wordy. Motion to approve the revised draft project plan dated 8/25/19 as amended. Well, I guess we can strike that if we're specifying the draft, on the condition that the parenthetical in section 10B be removed from the final document and that the city identify the source of city funds for any projected shortfall.
Does that sound like the spirit of what everyone was thinking? You guys got to give me feedback, or we're just going to sit here and stare at each other.
So this language stays in. I just didn't
Right,
understand.
on page 9 and on page 14, the parenthetical would be.
But
removed.
everything else stays in.
Yeah, and the city will identify the source of the city funds.
Anybody
or
need
other
some
funds
water?
For any projected shortfall. Is there one? Fresh water?
Is that the motion? Is that the motion?
If someone wants to make it, can I make the motion? Just to move us along.
No.
No, probably not.
No.
Oh, sorry.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Excellent. We have a motion on the floor. Will you please read the motion on the floor, Catherine?
Yes. Motion to approve the revised draft project plan dated 8/25/19 on the condition that the parenthetical in section 10B be removed from the final document and that the city identify the source of funds for any projected shortfall.
All right, that is the motion on the floor. Any discussion? Because we talked about it a lot. All right, well, let's just go ahead and take a vote and see where we're at, and let's do the old raising of hands so it's easier to count everybody. All right, those in...
For a minute so we can identify yays and nays specifically for the minutes. So.
Okay, so those in favor of approving the project plan, which was clearly listed here, that frees our ad valorem partners of any responsibility of any deficit that may exist, and the city will pick up the tab, and when the TIF ends, everyone gets their money back, raise your hand.
Just kind of like,
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Dr. Migliorino, is that
I'm
a...
like right here.
Okay,
I just want
I know. Anyone want to go to the Mont after this? I mean, I feel like we've worked really hard. All right, question number 3, because there's one more, correct?
We gotta take a vote on the noes.
Oh, all
We gotta
opposed.
record the noes.
Okay. Sorry, I just assumed everyone could fill in the blanks, but you're right. That would be official. All right. Now for the third question.
That didn't pass.
Did it pass?
I did 5-3.
5-3. Passed.
Okay.
6. My math's bad. So 6-3. June 6.
I have 5-2.
So
All right, yes, raise your hand. Opposed, same sign.
3. Health Department, County. Middle hand that throws out.
yeah, I'm still thrown on it. I'm not sold.
Yes votes 6, no votes 3.
Okay. So the next question is the third vote we need to take.
Let me go back to the PowerPoint. So, I mean, you really have done the last
already done
question,
that
which
one.
is approval of the project plan, but I think we need to have some specific findings on the financial impact.
I tried to work that into my language. Again, the TIF ends, everyone gets the full apportionment of the tax funds. If there is a deficit for any project plans, the city will pick that up. With the school district seems to be the wild card, though. So how would we sum up that part?
Well, I think the motion needs to be that you confirm that this project this change will have an economic impact, financial impact on all entities involved, with most negative being to the school district.
Yeah. Such that the taxing jurisdictions other than Norman Public Schools would receive the full benefit of the ad valorem tax being generated in the district. And the school district would be negatively impacted. I mean, I think that's why council certainly knows that. That's why the $350,000 was put in the amendment.
Can that be adjusted? Since they don't know how much they're going to be impacted. If their impact is higher, can we figure out a way to do that?
That's something that need to be negotiated.
Right. And that was based on the estimate we got. My understanding is the latest numbers changed that a little bit.
Well, and it's all
but-
tied to the aquatic center, and I don't know, I mean,
Nobody knows.
that's
the
just like
answer.
one thing. I mean, let's tie it to the SROs, let's tie it to, because there's a lot of impact there, because essentially what just out loud and hear what the impact is what we pay pretty much for SROs, which is significant and growing.
Yeah, needed.
Thought that was covered in PSST.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but what are we paying now, about $658 annually for
Yes,
SROs, and it hasn't, I mean, it still has a ways to go, so that will grow.
the PSST revenues have been short, and that's been part of council's concern.
Is that
Taking the
amount
TIF early.
subject to negotiation with the developer?
Yes, because that changes the total amount for the project cost, and that really affects the targeted revenue that we're trying to make sure we have. We talked about SROs, I'll just tell you at the council level if that was a way to address it, but because these are TIF funds, it was felt that the more appropriate use was something within the TIF district. Of course, you can't just cut a check to the school district or anyone else.
Thank you for reminding me about that, because I was like, I know we talked about it.
Yeah, but either way, just a question out here since it's been brought up. You're not cutting a check for $350 or whatever that ends up being. But since the revenue for the SROs is still already going through the city, there wouldn't have to be a check cut there either. It would just be a passive amount as well.
I'm not sure I follow you.
Well, I mean, we cut a check to the city
Right,
for the
based on the
SROs.
agreement.
But if that was lowered significantly, we would just cut less of a check.
Yeah, but that's not an authorized TIF expenditure, and so we'd be using.
But it wouldn't be an expenditure.
It would if it's being used to offset your contribution.
But it wouldn't.
For something that's not within the TIF.
It'd be an outside agreement. Outside of the TIF agreement.
So that would be part of what the city would make it up with their funds?
With TIF funds, it would be used to offset the contributions to the pool because it's within the TIF and would be an authorized
I see.
project cost. Yeah, that's the way we were able to kind of make that work.
We have people that are starting to need to leave, so can you clarify if we need to make a motion or not?
Well, you've approved the project plan subject to a condition, the amended project plan subject to conditions. But we need a finding on whether the amendments affect your initial approval of the project plan. And I know there's been discussion. I have an idea of what that answer would be, but I think we need a formal motion. And then
A motion to acknowledge,
a finding and recommendation is what the Local Development Act says. So a motion to reflect the committee's finding that whatever it is, and then the financial impact on the taxing jurisdictions piece.
so,
Didn't we do most of that with the previous motion?
Well, the motion just,
Because of the way you worded it, didn't we do 2 and 1 there?
yeah, you worded it more broadly than what the motion was.
I was
that
just
had
explaining it.
repeated. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So the motion was just to approve the revised draft project plan dated 8/25 with that one condition, or 2 conditions about the ad valorem increment and the city identifying the funding for the shortfall, if any.
so again, is it a motion to acknowledge the findings? Because we can reword that again. I just need to know what motion.
What do you want us to tell you?
Well, because we've talked about it. We talked about how
We've
TIF
talked
ends.
about it.
What's missing from this?
What's missing from all of this that we haven't done, that you need for
You
us
haven't-
specifically say?
Yeah, you haven't taken formal action on any of these 3 questions. It's just
We did the
been
first
in
one. We said that yes.
We did do the first one, you're right. I have that one. Then it's the second and the third one. So I think the motion for the second one would be,
I thought we did the second one. That was
Oh, we
the,
did too.
We approved
That was
the
the 6-2
changes.
one.
affect the initial approval. And so it's because, what's bothering me about that is because of what the statute says about looking at the effect on taxing entities and the appropriateness of the approval. So I think you need some specific finding that says the committee has looked at the effect on the taxing entities and finds that the project plan as amended or the revised draft dated 8/25/19 does or does not affect the committee's initial approval of the project plan.
And that's a yes or no vote, though.
Right, and if it does not, then I think we need to talk about what that would look like, maybe more specifically.
Okay.
Okay, I move to confirm that what was it, the draft proposal presented?
The revised draft project plan dated 8/25/19.
Revised project plan dated 8/25/19 does affect the committee's initial approval of the project plan.
And I think the piece we're missing is,
And that this will have an impact? Can we combine the two, or do they have to be separate?
combine the two.
Combine the two committees. Approval of the project plan.
Confirm that the revised 8/25/19 plan
We're not.
will affect the initial approval
So,
and have a financial impact on all entities,
On all taxing
all
jurisdictions.
taxing jurisdictions. Do we have to say it's going to be negative, or just recognize that it's going to
not
have? an
negative
effect?
for everyone,
Statute
that's the
requires
thing.
us
Yeah, 'cause
Does that cover the
am I
statute?
agreeing to
I think we're,
$750,000 if I say something to this? I mean, because I'm not going to agree to that until we have a chance, one, have our counsel, and we get through that whole process. So that's my question. I can't obligate the district to that.
We're just saying that it does affect the initial plan and that it will have an impact.
We are aware there's an
No
effect.
specifics,
We're aware of
it's
those
just
impacts.
whether it won't.
That's
'Cause it
why
could
I
be a
was saying I
positive
don't
or
know.
negative.
Could be positive or negative.
Right. That's why I was comfortable saying, I don't know that we have to know those exact numbers today, because we're just being asked to acknowledge that we know there's an effect.
yeah, that we've talked about it and are aware in this action.
We're not being,
Specific effects,
not a dollar
period.
amount.
No, well, and I'm not saying a dollar, or it's not tying me to this or that.
It's not tying you to anything.
I don't read where it is,
I'm
but
just, I
that's
mean,
your,
you guys are all the attorneys here. I mean,
We're just saying we've got a plan and it does change the initial idea and it does affect the taxing jurisdictions.
yeah, I just, the way I was reading the slide, and I don't know, is, we're just acknowledging there's a change.
Point
I
of
mean,
clarity.
I just don't want to, I can't commit to anything. That's what I want to make 100% sure, that I'm not committing the district to anything.
Well, I don't know if they're asking for commitments or just the fact that we've acknowledged it and talked about it.
But you saying, I don't think.
Well, I think we have to check
I mean, that's
that.
just like.
I hear you.
It says it shall include
Yeah.
Call
the
go to
effect on the
legislature.
taxing entities.
Say that again, Terry.
Says it shall include
Shall.
the effect on the taxing entities.
So what the effect is then,
Yes.
Where do you see
It's
that?
in B.
that
The
concerns
review
me.
committee recommendations shall include the analysis used to project revenues over the life of the project plan, which we have that because we have a firm end date, the effect on the taxing entities, and the appropriateness of the approval of the proposed plan and project.
We know at this
D
point it's
is
going
where
to
it
be
really
negative
talks
for
about
you.
changes.
We know it will be, but I mean, then, so I heard, read that part you just.
But when
read
you're
there.
dealing with taxing,
We just
how
don't,
can you be exact anyway?
we can't, we don't have
Not
the
asking-
amount.
Yeah.
Other than to acknowledge that it's going to be negative or positive
Sure.
or
And I
neutral.
understand that. I
Okay.
agree to
Can
that.
will that
But
satisfy
I don't
that?
want it to be assumed that it's any other.
Shall include the effect on the taxing entities.
So shall include the effect on the taxing, meaning the shall,
It will have
it'll
an
either be
impact.
positive or it'll be negative.
And the effect is the TIF ends, the end.
So,
And that is the actual, we doesn't have a number by it, but that is the direct effect.
like to us, we would know it would be 700
Okay.
something thousand.
We know it will have an effect on you.
Correct. Which hence the runway. So,
All right. any more, I think she's trying to,
When she gets to write down that clarification on the previous slide, it said effective 2020, yet our amendment said 2019.
It's the 2019 assessments.
Okay, but
Yeah.
the slide said 2020.
2020 is when the money would be received. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, but
Yeah.
as far as that slide, that doesn't affect, we don't need to take that out.
No, it's just beginning.
Yeah, it's the way that tax gets collected. They call them the 2019 assessments officially, but they don't get collected until January, February, March usually of 2020.
I just didn't want you to have a conflict
I
there.
I appreciate that. Sorry.
Sarah, I don't know if she's working on language or taking notes.
And I should have learned shorthand. Okay, this is long, but I've tried to incorporate what you all have been discussing about the impact. So motion to confirm or to reflect, either way, committee's finding that the revised draft dated 8/25/19 does affect the initial approval of the project plan and recognizes, in recognition that such amendments will result in the full ad valorem increment and sales tax increment going to the taxing jurisdictions, with the exception of the Norman Public Schools, which will be negatively impacted by the end of the increment due to the state's school funding formula application.
Do you need her to read that again?
Are you confident that that motion meets the statutory? I'm not saying it doesn't, I just want to make
Yeah,
sure that
I mean,
it's
it's-
really covering.
That's why I tried to break it down, because the statute isn't drafted well for a review of amendments. It's drafted well for the initial approval. But I think if we hit all these points in B and C, then I think we've met the statute. So we've already said that's eligible. We've looked at the, because we're ending the increment on a date certain, there's not really a projection of revenues other than this $2 million ad valorem tax from the 2019 assessment. So we have actual hard numbers for that analysis. We've looked at the effect on the taxing entities, the appropriateness of their approval of the proposed plan and project. And maybe that's where this motion could be changed a little bit. And then you've recommended that the project plan be approved subject to conditions. And C really talks again about that financial impact, which I think we would have covered. Do you want me to put this on the screen? Would that be easier than reading it over and over?
Probably.
Okay. I'm a visual person, so.
No, I can see it now. I'm already getting my gavel ready. Well, I just gotta cut them off, and when I turn the microphones off at the end of 3 minutes, they get really mad. Like, you can't say it in 3 minutes, it's not right.
A bigger font.
Well, after 2, some of them never get started. We hear their entire history about when they're living in Norman, instead of getting to the point. That's my big thing, I just keep wanting to say,
I'm gonna amend this as I write, probably to make it make more sense.
Yeah.
Somehow I keep managing to strike through. Keep hitting this mouse pad. It's missing, yeah.
And everybody's
In my
watching,
way.
so.
I know, no
you know
pressure,
that.
make me
Yeah.
The word recognizes, the committee recognizes that
Yeah.
recognizes that such amendments.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
I mean, it depends on what they prioritize that that goes to, so even if it's under the class.
That sounds like it is what it is.
Look at our age. Yep. And then they had posters up there with it right now. So, ready?
I'm ready.
Make a motion that we adopt the statement.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second? Okay, let's go ahead and take a vote and use our hands again so it's easier to record. All in favor of adopting the following statement, raise your right hand. Okay.
How many? Did you get to everybody?
I think it's the same as last time.
Is that
No.
6. Or did Bob
Yeah,
jump
Bob,
in this
yes.
time?
Bob jumped
Yeah.
in.
I was
Okay.
in.
All right.
It's 7.
She nodded at
Okay,
me
all
twice.
opposed, same sign?
Just
Well, I hadn't finished reading. so-
Oh, sorry.
Negatively.
Yeah, so,
Oh, go ahead.
not any specific actions being made up in the committee or anything that's written and talked about. I just think there's confusion as it's out there and people are talking about it and thinking it's it. And I'm just like, I've been in no conversations. Well, she was there, she brought it to me going, officially.
All opposed? Ready to,
well, I'm in favor of it, but you've already voted.
We can add you if you're.
Okay. Feel free to.
It's just an acknowledgement.
okay,
So any opposed?
okay. All right.
Did you vote either way?
I didn't.
So seeing that you also generously gave so much of your time today, I think we've met the needed action to move forward and we will not need a future meeting. However, if we do have changes, as we discussed, it will come back to us and we will be contacting you. And I will make sure that everyone gets more emails and is clear on the time, and I want to apologize for the miscommunication with that. And again, thank you for all of your time this afternoon.
So should we
Can I
save the
make-
September date just in case?
I think any changes would come after that, or I will let you clarify.
We're gonna work really hard to get this hammered out, these specific changes, this week.
So hold the date.
Hold the date just in case.
September
Can I make
16th.
a request on that as well?
Yes.
If we do have a meeting, kind of, let's know ahead of time what we're going to be asking for, because I really didn't feel 100% prepared on everything, because I think we were figuring it out on the fly. I appreciate coming in, being able to be prepared and not try to do all the learning at the table,
I completely agree.
okay?
Thank you. And can you remind us what the September date and time is?
16th?
16th at 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. Didn't have to look at our smartphone.
Is there any other business?
Are we keeping that meeting or are we canceling?
Keeping the meeting just in case.
Okay.
So we will get an email canceling the meeting.
Yes.
In other words, we're having a meeting
Unless we hear differently.
unless Sarah sends me a
Yes.
note that says no meeting.
Yeah, and if you will check your email address with her, we've had you on the list, but if you haven't been getting it, I don't know if it's going to your spam folder or if,
I got this one. I didn't
yeah,
just get the one
maybe it's the
before.
same one, so I
Jack
don't know.
didn't, from the health department, didn't get the request to come to this meeting either. She got the doodle poll, but not the meeting.
I think I honestly got the doodle poll.
Well, and there was an email that said, put these 2 dates on
There
your
was an
calendar.
email, too.
That was the last, that was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
There was yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know
And
who
I
got it
think
or
we've
didn't get it.
Well,
There was an email.
Was it Brian? I think we've got his, I mean, we've communicated with my email before.
A final confirmation
Yeah,
a
go
couple
ahead.
days before.
yeah,
Yes, we'll
I
do a
It's always
reminder.
helpful. I
Okay.
don't know that it's mandatory or
I
statutory.
think that's the
Okay.
good point. We
Thank
needed-
you.
We needed a
All right, I'll
confirmation.
entertain a
that-
motion
It
to
was-
adjourn.
Oh,
Second? Do I have a second? Second? All right, this meeting is adjourned.